The following is a summary of the Sicha of Shabbos Parshas Vaera, Tovshin Nun. That year, Rosh Chodesh Shvat fell on Shabbos. The inyan of Rosh Chodesh Shvat is mefurish in the pasuk. It says, "Vayehi ba'arboim shana be'ashtei osar chodesh be'echad lachodesh diber Moshe el kol b'nei Yisrael k'choil asher tziva Hashem osei aleihem." And then it continues, "Hoyel Moshe be'er es haTorah hazois." In other words, Rosh Chodesh Shvat was the day in the 40th year in the Midbar when Moshe Rabbeinu starts saying the Mishnah Torah. He's finished the first 4 Sfarim from Bereshis until the end of Bamidbar, and now he's going to start saying Eile HaDevarim. Hayomim ha'elu nizkarim v'nasim. Whenever we mention something in the past, it's not a historical fact, but v'nasim. It repeats over again, and in a way of Malin B'Kodesh. The Alter Rebbe said that we need to live with the times, with the Parshas HaShavua. And with this Parshas HaShavua, with the Parsha of Vaera, and what it says about Rosh Chodesh, there are clear horos, both from the idea of Rosh Chodesh and from the Parshas HaShavua. When we have a look about Hashem's speech to Moshe Rabbeinu on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, he says, "Hashem Elokeinu diber eleinu b'chorev lemor." Hashem spoke to us by chorev, saying, "Rav lachem sheves bahar hazeh, penu usuchu usu'u lachem, uvoyu haro emiri, eretz haknani v'halavonen ad hanahar hagol nahar pros, n're'eino sati lifnechem es haaretz, boyu urushu es haaretz, asher nishba Hashem laveisechem le'avram li'yitzchak le'Yaakov loseis lohem." In other words, when Moshe spoke to the Yidden on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, he was telling them that the time had come for them to enter into Eretz Yisrael. Matan Torah had been complete. The 4 Sefarim from Bereshis to Bamidbar were complete. And now they were starting Eile HaDevarim, the last book of the Chumash, and with that they would be able to enter into Eretz Yisrael. Eile HaDevarim asher diber Moshe el kol Yisrael. Eile is something which is revealed. And in this sense, the whole Torah finishes in the sense that every Dvar Torah, all Chalakim of Torah, Pardes of Torah, has been revealed until the Dvar Halacha, which is Masim with all the Chalakim of Torah. And with this culminates the Avodah of the Bnei Yisrael in Torah u'mitzvahs, both in Asay Tov and also in Sur Mirah. And therefore, when we experience Rosh Chodesh Shvat every single year, the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation and the spark of Moshe, which is in each one of us in the generation, announces, and it says that we have already completed our avodah of Torah mitzvahs, and now we are ready to enter into Eretz Yisrael with the Gula HaMitzvos Hashlema. That is emphasized in the Parshas HaShavua. At the beginning of the Parsha of Vaera, you have the answer of Hashem to the claim of Moshe. Moshe claimed, "Lama harayosa lama zeh," why did you make it so bad for this people? And Hashem answers him. He says, "You're right." He says there are 4, he gives the 4 expressions of Geula, and he says to them, he says to Moshe, "Ushmi Hashem lo nodaiti lahem." Although I appeared to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, I didn't appear to them with my name Hashem. In other words, with Matan Torah. And that's the connection of Matan Torah with the Kenisa, with the entry into Eretz Yisrael. Because after Matan Torah, the Gezerah of elyonim lo yerdu lamata, the upper not descending to the lower, v'tachtonim lo yalu lamaila, and the lower not going to the upper, is taken away. And therefore, after Matan Torah specifically, there can be the Kenisa, the entry into Eretz Canaan, and to make it Eretz Yisrael, which that concept includes all Ma'asenu v'Avodasenu during the entire Golus, taking the entire world and transforming it into Eretz Yisrael, Machda Eretz Yisrael, making Adira Lo Yisbarach B'Tachtonim. And therefore, every single year, when we read the Parsha of Vaera B'Tzibur, there is again revealed the answer of Hashem to the claim of Moshe. That Moshe says, Me'oz bosi ledaber b'shmecha, since I came to speak in your name, hatzel lo hitzalta esamecha, you haven't saved your people. And similarly, Moshe Rabbeinu in the generation, and the spark of Moshe within each Yid, says to Hashem that since Matan Torah has been given already, and it's over 3,300 years since Matan Torah, then for sure Yidden have all Torah mitzvahs begolui in a way of Vaera, and therefore it's the time that you should fulfill the promise to take us out of Golus. This is emphasized more in this year, in the year the Sicha was said in Tafshin Nun, when Rosh Chodesh Shvat falls on Parshas Vaera. Let's explain this more in detail. In Parshas Vaera, it's talked about Matan Torah as it will be. In other words, Hashem said, I appeared to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but Shmi Hashem lo nodaiti lehem, so therefore there will be the Exodus, and thereafter the Gilui Milamayla, the revelation from above of Matan Torah. So in Vaera we're talking about Matan Torah as it is a Gilui, a revelation from above. On Rosh Chodesh Shvat, Rosh Chodesh Shvat reminds us of the revelation of Eile HaDevarim, the Mishnah Torah, how Torah is B'daitoi u'b'hasagosei shel Moshe, within the mind and perception of Moshe, and through that in Yidden. In other words, how Torah permeates the mind of man. And this is emphasized that in the fact that it was said, Vayihi ba'arboim shana, in the 40th year after Yitzias Mitzrayim, which then, as the Pasuk says, they were given Lev Lodas, Einayim Lirois, Ve'oznaim Lishmaya, a heart to understand, eyes to see, and ears to hear. As it says that after 40 years, a person understands the words of their teacher. In other words, Torah had been received in their minds, in their perception, which that is the culmination and completion of the giving of the Torah. Not only Torah as it is, as a gilui, as a revelation from above, but also the culmination of milamata lamaila, the understanding of Torah from within the human mind. And that is expressed in the number 40, because the number 40 expresses shleimus hamoichin, complete intellect, as it says in terms of age, ben arboim lebina, that when a person reaches the age of 40, then they come to the age of understanding. The number 40 represents the four moichin, the four brains of Chachma, Bina, and Das is split into two, into Chesed and into Gvura. And you have that hinted to in the Pasuk. It says, Einayim Lirois, Re'iyah is the idea of Chachma, Oznaim Lishmaya, Shmiya is the idea of Bina, and Alev La Das as it's divided into Chesed and Gvura. And that's connected with the Geula in the sense that the Geula is represented in a final mem, as it says in the Pasuk, Lemarbe HaMisra, and that is a final mem, a remez to the Geula. And the Rambam himself finishes the Sefer Mishnah Torah with the words that Kamayim Layam Mechasim, that the world will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem as the water covers the sea, meaning that the knowledge of Hashem permeates every matter of the world. And it's interesting that the words Kamayim, Layam, Mechasim all end in a final mem. And in the expression of Kabbalah and Chassidus, the letter mem represents the sphera of Bina as it reveals the level of Atik which transcends Hishtalshelus. All this takes place in the month which is Ashtei Osor, which is the 11th month. It's explained in Chassidus that Pnimius HaKeser, the inner level of Keser, and Tuchad is represented by the number 11. In other words, the 10 spheres are Yud, and Yud Aleph represents Pnimius HaKeser. In other words, after 10 months of the year, including the 10th month of Asira Year Kodesh of month of Teves, we come to Rosh Chodesh Shvat, which is the 11th month, which is the Gilui, the revelation of the level of Keser. And this starts with the Shlemus, with the completion of Matan Torah, the Anoichi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzeisecha Me'eretz Mitzrayim, and this Anoichi, this level of Keser, is hinted to in the word Shvat, because Shvat is like a Shevet, as it says, V'kom Shevet Yisrael, which is a reference to Melech HaMashiach, which is a Gilui, a revelation of Pnimius HaKeser. So consequently, when we have the juxtaposition, the joining together, the fusion of Rosh Chodesh Shvat on Parshas Vaera, so therefore you have the fusion of these two ideas. Vaera is the Gilui Milamayla, the revelation from above of Torah, and Rosh Chodesh Shvat is the idea of culminating the full appreciation of Torah from below. And this is also hinted to in the first words of the Sedra. Va'era, as we said, which is the idea of Gilui Milamayla, revelation from above. El Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the three Kavin, and the Shlemos of the fourth leg of the Merkava, which is David Malka Mashiach. Lochein Amor Livnei Yisrael, the four Lashonas of Geula, until the Lashon HaChamishis V'Hevesi, the idea of bringing the Yidden to the Geula. And that is, we have therefore all this coming together when Rosh Chodesh falls on Shabbos, because Shabbos is connected with the Mahalach HaChama, with the movement of the sun, which is the idea of a mashpia, a gilui melamayla, a revelation from above, and Rosh Chodesh is connected with the Mahalach Halavana, with a makabel, with a receiver, which is a movement from below. Rosh Chodesh is achieved through Re'iyas Halavana, through seeing the moon, and also through Cheshbon, through the calculation, which the idea in Avodas Hashem is, seeing is a Gilui Melamayla, revelation from above, and Cheshbon and calculation is something that's done from below. That's the very first mitzvah in the Torah, Kiddush HaChodesh. The idea is, the very first mitzvah is the Chibur, the fusion of both together, that you have a Gilui Melamayla, which permeates and completely fills the matter and the appreciation and perception of the person. And in fact, that is very much the case in terms of Cheshbon of the Rosh Chodesh, which is fixed according to the Beis Din, the earthly court, Atem afilu shogigim, that you, the Beis Din, even if they make a mistake in it, it still follows their Cheshbon, because the calculation of the new moon has to be done by the earthly court. And therefore, this whole above Sicha, which is stressed, the Shlemus of Matan Torah, that after the 40 years, they have come to the culmination and full and completion of Matan Torah, and therefore the readiness to enter into the land of Eretz Yisrael. This brings home, now that we have completed Ma'aseinu v'Avodaseinu throughout the Golus, and we're ready for the Geula. And this is most emphasized in this year, the Shnas Harboim, meaning in Tavshin Nun, which was the 40th year. Because one of the main principles of Matan Torah is a Gilui, is a revelation of Pnimius HaTorah. As it says, V'yadaitem ki ani Hashem, you should know that I am Hashem. As the Zohar says, Pekuda da kadma l'chol pikudin, this mitzvah of knowing Hashem is the very first and most important mitzvah, to know Hashem in a way of havana v'hasaga, of understanding. As it says about the Zohar, by Sifra Dilach, that with this book of yours, of the book of Zohar, will go out of Golus. And this is what Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov, Eimosai ka'asi mar, when will you come? When l'chshiafutze ma'nesecha chutza. The main gilui of that started in the days of the Arizal, which then he said, mitzvah legalos es hachachma, it's a mitzvah to reveal this wisdom of Pnimius HaTorah in his days. And certainly, after the year 500 of the 6th millennium, in other words, the year 5500, which is the beginning of the day of the 6th day of the 6th millennium, or after half day of Friday, then we had the revelation of Chassidus through the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, and especially after Peterburg, and all the way going until our Rebbe, which then, both in his earthly life and thereafter, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that he's even stronger after than he was beforehand. We have the 9th Nasi since the Baal Shem Tov, which is the last generation of Golus and the first of Geula. And the great advantage of this is emphasized in the year Tavshin Nun, 40 years of the 9th Nasi, when we have the complete Avodah standing on Rosh Chodesh, Rosh, which includes all of the month, including the day of Yud Shvat. Therefore, on this day, Moshe Rabbeinu in our generation makes an announcement. And similarly, the spark of Moshe in each one of us makes an announcement and says, Rav lachem shebes b'har hazeh. It's enough standing by the mountain. We finish Ma'aseinu v'Avodaseinu. We've done a huge amount of Torah mitzvahs. Eila hadvarim, everything is clear, and all the negativity of the past has been fixed already through the avodah of Teshuvah, especially through Su'u'es Reish B'nai Yisrael, the lifting up of the Yidden through Rabbi Seinu Nesienu. And therefore, the Moshe Rabbeinu of our generation carries on, and he announces, Penu u'su'u lachem, boyu u'rushuas ha'aretz, asher nishba Hashem laveisechem. In other words, it's time to go into Eretz Yisrael. It's time for the Geula. It's time for Hevesi to bring the 5th expression of redemption, especially in the year Tavshin Nun, after the Chatzos, after midday of the 6th day, or the 3rd hour after Chatzos. This is a moment, Somuch Mamish, literally just before Shabbos. And therefore, in Oisias Pshutais, in simple, clear language, and practically, throughout the generations, Yidden have awaited the coming of Mashiach. And even though we don't understand the reason for the arichas, the length of the Golus, however, now that all the simonim of the Geula, the signs of Geula, have been fulfilled, and kalu kol hakitzin, and nevertheless this hasn't detracted an iota from our strong emunah, and we are still shouting ad Mosai, and certainly when there comes a moment which is very, very auspicious, we need to take the moment and demand and beg for the Geula to come immediately through Hafotzas Hamayonos Chutza, through men, women, and children, especially the women. For the women, they are a Gilgul, the women of the last generation of Golus are a Gilgul of the women who were in Mitzrayim, in whose merit the Gula came. This should all happen and start on Shabbos itself. A hisofa in Limud Torah, and mefakchen al tzorich tzibur b'Shabbos, we should increase in the public, caring for the public on Shabbos. And the Rebbe said, Ani hamaschil, I am going to start by giving an amount of 40 from Kupas Rabbeinu, from a fund of the Rebbe, to all the moistus institutions which stand under his nesius, in order to increase their pu'ula. And as it says, Kolonotel Pruta Me'iyov Misbarach, one who takes even a small coin from Iyov will be blessed. How much more so if it's given in this number? And this should encourage also the opening of new institutions in the number 40. And everybody should give tzedakah also in the number 40. And v'yehi rotzein, that speaking about all this should actually lead and bring to the coming of the Gula Amitzas Hashlema B'Poel Mamash, Tekev Umiyad Mamash.